There are moments when something happens, and the only thing we can see is loss. Losing a job, losing a relationship, losing a plan we were certain would work out. And almost instinctively, the first reaction most people have is to conclude very quickly, this is something bad. But perhaps one of our quietest mistakes is trying to understand the meaning of an event too early. Some things, when seen through the eyes of today, look like a crack in life. But a few months later, a few years later, we realize that the very crack we feared was what changed the direction of everything. I remember a man named Min. He lived a very ordinary life, the kind that from the outside no one would think was particularly noteworthy. 39 years old, living alone in a rented apartment in the suburbs. When every morning he woke up at 6:10, he poured coffee into the same dark blue ceramic mug that had a small chip on the rim. He put on a shirt, drove to the logistics company where he worked, finished his shift, and on the way home stopped by the supermarket if the fridge was out of eggs. On weekends, he called his mother. Sometimes he sat in the car a few extra minutes before going upstairs, just to enjoy a little silence. His life was not glamorous, but it was stable. And after a divorce and several exhausting years, stability for many people already feels like a form of peace. Then one Tuesday morning, the company laid off employees. It happened so quickly that he didn't even have time to react. A short meeting, a few very professional sentences, an envelope, a handshake. That was it. By noon, he was sitting in his car with a cardboard box on the passenger seat. Inside were a few small things: an old photo frame, 2 pens, a nearly empty bottle of headache medicine, and the hoodie he kept at the office because the air conditioning was always too cold. Many people think the biggest pain of losing a job is money, but that's not always true. Sometimes the most painful thing is the feeling that the structure holding your life upright has suddenly been removed. What do you wake up for tomorrow? Where do you dress nicely to go? The sense that you still belong to some rhythm of life. In the United States, people often ask, "What do you do?" before they ask, "Who are you?" So sometimes losing a job isn't just losing income. It feels like losing part of your identity. During the first few days, Sitiram Min barely slept. Every night he edited his resume, sent applications, checked and rechecked his email. The small kitchen in his apartment began to feel uncomfortably quiet. The sound of the microwave spinning seemed louder than usual. The empty chair across the dining table felt like a reminder that something in his life had just disappeared. Then, just when he hadn't even finished processing that loss, something else happened. One cold afternoon, he drove out to a park because he couldn't bear sitting in the apartment any longer. Wet leaves, slippery ground. One wrong step, and he slipped, breaking his ankle. Anyone who has gone through a streak of bad events understands that feeling. It's no longer just, "I'm having bad luck." It starts to feel like, maybe my life is actually going downhill. When people suffer, they don't just endure the event. They also begin telling themselves a story about that event. One bad thing happens, we call it a sign. 2 bad things happen, we call it fate. And from that moment on, we start seeing everything through a darker lens than reality. Min did the same. He sat at home with his leg brace, his crutches leaning against the wall, and began feeling clumsy in a way that felt strangely sad. He would drop a sock on the floor and stare at it for a long time before bending down to pick it up. Carrying a bag of groceries from the door to the kitchen became exhausting. Some days he stood at the sink washing a single cup and felt an unexpected emptiness inside. The neighbor downstairs was an older woman. Sometimes she knocked on his door with a warm container of soup or asked if he needed anything from the store. One evening, seeing him sitting quietly at the table, she said just one short sentence. "Some things ruin our plans, but save us from a worse road." At that moment, he didn't believe her. And honestly, most of us wouldn't believe a sentence like that when we are standing in the middle of the storm. Because when we're in pain, we want an explanation immediately. We want to know whether something is good or bad right now. But life rarely answers that quickly. A few days later, his phone rang. His mother had been hospitalized after a mild stroke. He drove to the hospital through cold rain, his ankle aching, his mind numb. Hospital hallways always carry a very particular feeling. White lights, the smell of old coffee, footsteps passing back and forth, the steady beep of heart monitors. His mother lay there, Shah looking suddenly smaller in the hospital bed. There are moments of adulthood that arrive very late and painfully. One of them is the first time you see your parents are no longer invincible. His sister had small children and a busy job. The one person who could stay at the hospital with their mother was him. The man who had just lost his job. The man with the injured ankle. The man who believed he was the unluckiest person that month. So he stayed. He stayed through long evenings. He stayed while doctors explained test results. He helped his mother sit up. He opened food containers, adjusted her blanket, supported her slow steps to the bathroom. And one night, sitting alone in the hallway with a cup of coffee from the vending machine, he suddenly understood something quietly profound. If I hadn't lost my job, I would probably be at work right now. If I hadn't broken my ankle, I might still be rushing through life and telling my mother, "I'll visit soon." If everything had gone according to plan, maybe I wouldn't be here. At the moment, she needed someone the most. That was the first moment he stopped calling everything that had happened bad luck. Not because it stopped hurting, not because everything suddenly became beautiful, but because he began to understand that some things, when seen up close, look like loss. Yet when seen from a little farther away, they look more like arrangement. Life has a strange way of working. It doesn't always give us what we want at the moment we want it, but sometimes it places us exactly where we need to be. Through circumstances we would never choose ourselves. That is why people who have lived through many difficult seasons often become slower to judge life. They don't celebrate good fortune too quickly, because they know today's blessing may carry tomorrow's cost. A big opportunity may hide a quiet price. A compliment may feed the ego. A smooth period may make someone careless, but they also don't collapse completely when things go wrong, because they have seen days that seem to close everything, only to open another path later. Calmness is not the absence of feeling. Calmness means you can still feel pain without immediately calling it a final verdict. You can feel joy without declaring it a final victory. It means keeping enough distance in your heart for time to pass and finish telling the rest of the story. Eventually, Min found a new job. Not more glamorous, not dramatically higher paying, but better suited to him. Less pressure, less chaos. And strangely, after those months, he was different too. He called his mother more often. He appreciated ordinary meals more deeply. He compared himself to others less. He was less arrogant when life went well. And most importantly, he panicked less when life changed direction. For many people, faith doesn't come from something grand. It comes from looking back and realizing, back then, I understood nothing. Some unseen hand was quietly holding me back, not to punish me, but to guide me toward another path. Not everyone calls that God. Not everyone calls it fate. But almost everyone who lives long enough eventually has at least one moment when they look back and think, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here today. So if right now something in your life feels confusing, painful, or completely against your plans, perhaps what you need most is not forced optimism and not pretending to be strong. Sometimes the most important thing is simply not to conclude too quickly. And if your days right now feel peaceful, enjoy them. Be grateful for them. But don't become arrogant because of them. Don't assume you understand life completely. Don't assume everything is firmly in your control. Because some things we call blessings today may later reveal themselves as tests. And some things we call losses today may eventually prove to be protection from something worse. Perhaps maturity begins when we stop demanding immediate explanations from life. When we accept that some answers belong only to time. And while we wait for those answers, we continue living kindly. We remain grateful. We keep our hearts soft. We trust that not every closed door is meant to push us into darkness. Some doors close simply to make us stand still for a moment, long enough to realize we were about to walk down the wrong road. Peace does not come from a life that never changes. Peace comes from no longer panicking when it does. And perhaps that is one of the deepest forms of freedom a human being can have. Not rushing to call a day good, not rushing to call a day bad, just quietly continuing forward, holding gratitude when receiving, humility when having, and faith when not yet understanding. Because sometimes the thing that hurts the most today is the very thing that, years later, we will look back on with completely different eyes. Not lightly, but gently enough to smile and say, back then, I truly didn't know. Thank you for taking the time to listen and for allowing me to be with you for the past few minutes. Have a good rest. Tomorrow is a new day. Wishing you peace and happiness.